Afternoon, officer. Could you tell me the legal basis for this stop?
Well, your car just looks a little out of place for this neighborhood. Wanted to see what was going on.
So no traffic violation, no equipment issue?
Look, sir, I'm asking the questions here. Keep your hands where I can see.
Understood. Just so we're clear, I'm a licensed criminal defense attorney. My badge and ID are right.
For 18 years, attorney Jamal A. Kingsley had been the man corrupt officers hated to see walk into court. A black criminal defense strategist who spent his entire adult life fighting crime, dismantling lies, and holding lawbreakers accountable, no matter the badge they wore. But none of that mattered on a quiet suburban afternoon when a patrol officer swerved behind his sedan, claiming it didn't belong in this neighborhood. No violation, no probable cause, just pure racial suspicion. What the officer didn't know was that Jamal had already hit record, live streaming every constitutional violation to his legal team. And what happens next will cost that cop his career and cost the city $500,000. Keep watching to see the downfall unfold. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. But if you're new here, hit that like and subscribe button, because accountability only works when it's recorded. The afternoon was perfect, the kind of late summer day where the light had turned golden and warm and the temperature was just beginning to drop from the heat of midday. Willow Bend Road was quiet, tree-lined, the kind of suburban street where nothing ever happened. The houses were modest to middle class, ranging from 1970s colonials to more recent constructions. The yards were maintained, the driveways were clean. The neighborhood was the kind of place where people believed safety was guaranteed, where people believed that the rules applied equally, where people believed that authority operated fairly. Attorney Jamal A. Kingsley was driving on Willow Bend Road at 4:14 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon in early September. He was in his black 2023 Lexus sedan. The vehicle was clean. He maintained it meticulously. The registration was current. The insurance was current. The inspection sticker was current. Everything was in order. Absolutely everything was legal. He was driving at the speed limit. He was maintaining proper distance from other vehicles. He was not weaving. He was not speeding. He was not violating any traffic laws. He was simply driving home after a day at his office. He had had 3 client meetings. He had reviewed case files. He had drafted motions. He had done what he did every day. He had practiced law. He had defended constitutional rights. Behind him, a patrol cruiser rolled slowly. The officer inside was Officer Marcus Wellington. Officer Wellington was 37 years old. He had been on the police force for 13 years. He had conducted approximately 2,400 traffic stops over those 13 years. He had been the subject of 6 internal affairs complaints. None of them had resulted in discipline. None of them had resulted in changes to his conduct. Officer Wellington had a reputation in the department. He was known as aggressive. He was known for escalating encounters quickly. He was known for making stops based on vague suspicions. He was known for not backing down. He was also known, among those who paid attention to such patterns, for stopping a disproportionate number of Black and Latino drivers. Officer Wellington saw Jamal's vehicle. He saw a black man in a luxury sedan on a quiet suburban street. The calculation happened instantly in his mind. The calculation was not based on any traffic violation. There was no traffic violation. The calculation was based entirely on the assumption that a black man should not be driving an expensive vehicle in a nice neighborhood. Officer Wellington did not observe any traffic violation. He had no probable cause to conduct a stop. He had no reasonable suspicion. He had only an assumption. But the assumption was enough for him. It was always enough for him. It had been enough for 13 years. It had been enough for 2,400 stops. He swerved behind Jamal's vehicle. He did not follow at a safe distance first to observe if any traffic laws were being violated. He did not give the driver a chance to commit a traffic offense. He simply activated his lights immediately. The red and blue lights filled Jamal's rearview mirror at 4:14 p.m. Jamal immediately responded appropriately. He moved to the right lane. He activated his turn signal well in advance. He slowed gradually and smoothly. He did not brake suddenly. He moved toward the shoulder of the road. He pulled over completely, moving beyond the edge of the roadway into a wide shoulder area. He turned off the engine. He placed his hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2. His hands were visible through the window. His posture was non-threatening. He was demonstrating absolute compliance with police procedure. Everything he did communicated, "I am not a threat. I am cooperating." The body cam activated as Officer Wellington exited his vehicle at 4:15 p.m. The timestamp was recorded. The image showed Jamal from behind initially, sitting calmly in his vehicle, hands on the steering wheel, everything about his posture communicating cooperation and respect for authority. Officer Wellington approached the driver's side window. He did not approach cautiously. He did not approach with the caution that would be shown to someone who might be a threat. He approached with aggression. His hand was near his belt. His posture was tense. His jaw was clenched. He did not introduce himself. He did not state a reason for the stop. He simply approached with purpose. Jamal had already rolled down his window before the officer reached it. He was looking forward, not at the officer. His posture was open. His breathing was steady. His hands remained on the wheel. He was not startled. He was not defensive. He was a man who had been in this situation before. He was a man who understood what was happening. He was a man who had seen this pattern hundreds of times in his career. He had defended people who had experienced exactly this. "This car looked out of place," Officer Wellington said. His voice was not neutral. It was not professional. It was accusatory. It carried the assumption of guilt. "Step out for me." "For what reason?" Jamal asked. His voice was calm, professional, measured. The voice of someone used to speaking in controlled tones. The voice of someone used to courtrooms and judges and precise language. Officer Wellington's jaw tightened. The body cam captured the micro-expression, the moment where someone encountered a question about his authority, the moment where someone asked him to justify himself. "I don't have to explain myself," Officer Wellington said. His voice had risen slightly. His hand had moved closer to his belt. "Out now. Don't make this difficult."
Attorney Jamal A. Kingsley was born in 1987 in St. Louis, Missouri. His childhood had been lived in a neighborhood called The Hill, which was a historically Italian neighborhood that had become predominantly black over decades. It was a neighborhood where crime was visible and police were constant presence. It was a neighborhood where the relationship between residents and law enforcement was complicated and often traumatic. His parents had worked hard to keep him and his younger sister away from that reality. His mother, Angela Kingsley, had been a registered nurse at a major hospital. She had worked long shifts. She had worked double shifts sometimes. She had worked to provide stability and safety. His father, James Kingsley Sr., had been a high school counselor. He had worked with students who had experienced trauma. He had understood that education could be a path forward. They had taught their children that education was the path forward, that following the law was not just about avoiding punishment. Following the law was about understanding how power worked. Following the law was about understanding how to challenge abuse of power. They had taught him that the law could be either a shield or a weapon. It depended on who wielded it. It depended on whether they wielded it fairly. Jamal had listened to his parents. He had excelled in school. He had graduated from the University of Missouri in 2009 with honors. He had been accepted to several law schools. He had attended Washington University Law School in St. Louis, where he had the opportunity to stay in his community. He had graduated in 2012, ranking in the top 15% of his class. He had been offered positions at prestigious law firms. He had turned them all down. He had chosen criminal defense law deliberately, not because it paid the most. It did not. Criminal defense attorneys made significantly less than prosecutors or corporate attorneys. He had chosen it because he believed that the Constitution's protections meant nothing unless someone was willing to fight for them in court. He had chosen it because he had watched his community experience police abuse, and he wanted to be someone who held officers accountable. For 18 years, he had worked as a criminal defense attorney. He had started at a public defender's office. He had spent 5 years defending people who could not afford attorneys. He had spent those 5 years building an understanding of how the system worked and how it failed people. Then he had opened his own practice. He had specialized in cases involving constitutional violations. He had focused specifically on police misconduct. He had defended clients accused of crimes, many of whom had been arrested illegally. He had fought in courtrooms against prosecutors who did not care about constitutional violations and officers who believed that the Constitution was an obstacle, not a protection. His conviction rate in criminal defense, meaning his acquittal and dismissal rate, was unusual. 63% of his cases resulted in acquittals or dismissals. In criminal defense, where prosecutors have significant resources and the burden of proof is on the defense, that was exceptional. That was revolutionary. He had saved dozens of people from wrongful convictions. He had exposed dozens of officers as dishonest or unconstitutional in their conduct. He had published articles in legal journals on Fourth Amendment protections and how they were being eroded by police practice. He had written a book titled The Color of Suspicion, Racial Profiling and Constitutional Law, which had become required reading in law schools across the country. The book had documented patterns of racial profiling in traffic stops. The book had provided legal strategies for challenging those stops. The book had cited hundreds of cases where officers had conducted illegal stops based on race. His name was known in legal circles as someone who was brilliant, meticulous, and absolutely committed to constitutional protections. He was respected by judges. He was feared by prosecutors. He was hated by police unions. He had spent his entire adult life fighting power, defending the powerless, and ensuring that constitutional rights were not theoretical concepts. They were lived, enforced realities. He had also been the lead attorney in a landmark civil rights case, Kingsley versus Harmon, which had resulted in a federal appellate decision that changed how courts evaluated traffic stops. The case had established that an officer must articulate specific, articulable facts that justify a stop. A hunch was not sufficient. A feeling was not sufficient. Suspicion based on appearance was not sufficient. The decision had affected thousands of cases nationwide. It had made it harder for officers to conduct stops based on racial profiling. It had set a legal standard that required actual evidence, not just bias. Jamal A. Kingsley also understood the specific vulnerability of being a black man in America. He understood that despite his education, despite his law degree, despite his professional accomplishments, despite his power in a courtroom, he was still subject to the same assumptions that affected every black person in this country. He understood that a police officer might see his suit and his education and his success and still see only a black man in an expensive car in a neighborhood where he supposedly did not belong. He had experienced traffic stops. He had been pulled over without probable cause. He had been questioned without legal justification. He had always remained calm, always been polite, always documented everything, always known that his profession, his education, and his power might not protect him when facing an officer who was determined to exercise authority without legal constraint.
"License and registration," Officer Wellington said. His voice was clipped and authoritative. He was not asking. He was commanding. Now. "Absolutely, officer," Jamal said. He was compliant. He was already reaching for his documents. But he was also asking questions. He was exercising his rights. "First, what is the reason for the stop? What traffic violation did I commit?" "Your car feels suspicious," Officer Wellington said. The words came out before he had clearly thought them through, but he said them, and they were captured on the body cam. The words hung there. Feels was not probable cause. Feels was not reasonable suspicion. Feels was bias. Feels was assumption. Feels was exactly what the Kingsley v. Harmon decision had prohibited. The body cam captured the moment where a police officer had articulated no legal basis for the stop. "Feels is not probable cause under the Fourth Amendment," Jamal said. His voice was still calm, but something had shifted. It had become legal, precise, educational, the voice of someone who had made these arguments 1,000 times. An officer must articulate specific, articulable facts that constitute reasonable suspicion. Your feeling about my vehicle is not sufficient under the law. Officer Wellington's face reddened, not from embarrassment, from anger, from frustration, from someone who had never been questioned about his authority being questioned about his authority. In 13 years of conducting 2,400 stops, how many drivers had questioned his authority? How many had asked for the legal basis? How many had understood the Constitution well enough to cite it? "You trying to be a smart guy?" Officer Wellington asked. His tone had shifted. It was no longer professional. It was personal. It was hostile. "No," Jamal said. "I'm trying to be a citizen with constitutional rights. I'm trying to understand the legal basis for this stop. I'm trying to comply with lawful orders while declining to comply with unlawful orders." Officer Wellington reached down and grabbed Jamal's door handle. The body cam captured the action, the moment where he took physical control of the vehicle. "Step out of the vehicle," Officer Wellington said. His hand was moving toward the door. His voice had risen. His body had tensed. "Now." "On what legal basis?" Jamal asked. He did not move. His hands remained on the steering wheel. His posture remained calm. An officer can only order a driver out of a vehicle if there is reasonable suspicion that the driver poses a threat to safety. What reasonable suspicion do you have that I pose a threat? Officer Wellington yanked the door open. The sound was sharp. The movement was aggressive. "Step out or I'll drag you out," Officer Wellington said. His voice was lower now, more dangerous. His hand was on his belt. He was escalating rapidly. He was losing control. He was letting his anger guide his actions rather than the law. "This entire interaction is being recorded on your body cam. You are violating my Fourth Amendment rights. You are assaulting me on camera. I am not resisting. I am not threatening you. I am simply asserting my constitutional rights." Officer Wellington paused. The body cam captured the hesitation, the moment where he understood that this was being recorded. But only for a moment. His anger overrode his hesitation. He pulled Jamal out of the vehicle anyway. Jamal exited without resisting. He stepped slowly. He kept his hands visible. He was not going to escalate. "I'm gonna call for backup," Officer Wellington said. He was reaching for his radio. His voice was official now. He was creating a record. He was documenting the incident from his perspective. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7, Officer Wellington said. His voice carried into the radio. The dispatcher would hear every word. "I've stopped a vehicle on Willow Bend Road. Driver is non-compliant, acting hostile, refusing to follow lawful orders, requesting backup for assistance." Jamal heard the lies being broadcast to the entire department. He heard himself being described as non-compliant when he was cooperating. He heard himself being described as hostile when his voice had remained calm throughout. He heard himself being described as refusing lawful orders when the orders themselves had been unlawful. But Jamal was not going to argue. Jamal was doing something else, something that Officer Wellington did not yet realize, something that would change everything. Officer Harding walked back to his patrol vehicle. The body cam was still recording as he opened his door and sat in the driver's seat. He could be heard on the audio, speaking to dispatch. "License and registration for Keisha Mitchell. Vehicle registered to the same. Mercedes-Benz E-Class. Running the information now." The body cam then captured Officer Harding sitting in his vehicle, the documents in his hands. He was reading something on his computer screen. His face was visible in the rear-view mirror. He was frowning. Everything was legal. Every document was in order. The vehicle was registered. The insurance was current. The driver had no outstanding violations, no warrants, no criminal history. But Officer Harding was not satisfied. He exited his vehicle and returned to the driver's window. This time, his demeanor had changed. The casual, routine approach had been replaced with something else, something more accusatory. "Miss Mitchell," he said. He used her last name only. "I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle." "Am I being cited for something?" Dr. Mitchell asked.
"Step out of the vehicle, please," Officer Harding repeated. Dr. Mitchell opened the door carefully. She exited slowly. She did not argue. She did not resist. She simply complied. Officer Harding gestured for her to stand near the front of the vehicle. The body cam captured the positioning. He was creating distance, creating authority, creating the appearance of potential threat. "How did you come into possession of this vehicle?" Officer Harding asked. "I purchased it 6 months ago. I have all the documentation." "That's what the registration says," Officer Harding said. "But registrations can be forged. Documents can be falsified." "My documents aren't forged," Dr. Mitchell said. Her voice remained calm. "They're from my bank. They're from the dealership. They're legitimate." "People steal cars," Officer Harding said. He was speaking as if she hadn't answered. "They register them under false names. They drive them for weeks before anyone notices." "I didn't steal this car," Dr. Mitchell said. "I own it." Officer Harding moved closer. The body cam captured the invasion of space, the physical pressure, the attempt to intimidate through proximity. "You understand that grand theft auto is a felony. That's jail time. That's a criminal record. That's serious consequences." "I understand, and I also understand that I haven't committed any crime." Officer Harding was silent. The body cam captured his face. His jaw was tight. He was not accustomed to being contradicted. He was not accustomed to someone refusing to admit to a crime they hadn't committed. "I'm going to need you to follow me to the station, where we can verify all of this information." "Am I being arrested?" Dr. Mitchell asked. "Not yet. You're being detained pending investigation."
Another patrol car turned the corner. Officer Wellington's supervisor, Sergeant David Matthews, pulled up. Sergeant Matthews was older, calmer, more experienced. He had been in law enforcement for 23 years. He understood liability. He understood exposure. He understood what happened when officers violated constitutional rights. Sergeant Matthews exited his vehicle with purpose. He approached Jamal directly. He saw the Bar Association card still in Jamal's hand. He saw the identification. "That's not—" Sergeant Matthews began to read the name. His face changed. His eyes widened. His stomach probably dropped. "Kingsley? As in the Kingsley versus Harmon case?" "Yes," Jamal said. "The same case that established that officers cannot conduct traffic stops based on racial suspicion. The same case that requires specific, articulable facts for reasonable suspicion. The same case that your officer appears to have violated completely on camera." Sergeant Matthews looked at Officer Wellington. The look was not angry. It was disappointed. It was the look of someone who understood that his officer had just made a catastrophic mistake, a mistake that would cost the city money, a mistake that would end a career, a mistake that would be studied in law schools. "Officer Wellington, step back," Sergeant Matthews said. His voice was calm, but carried absolute authority. "Attorney Kingsley, you are free to go. I sincerely apologize for this interaction. There is no legal basis for this stop. You have not committed any traffic violation. You have violated no laws. You are completely free to proceed on your way." Officer Wellington did not argue. He did not resist. He simply stepped back. He had been overruled by his supervisor. The interaction was over, but the consequences were just beginning. Jamal closed his vehicle door. He rolled up his window. He waited as Sergeant Matthews moved away. He turned on his engine. He carefully checked his mirrors and moved back onto Willow Bend Road. As he drove away, Jamal looked in his rearview mirror. Officer Wellington was standing on the side of the road, watching him drive away. Officer Wellington's face was blank. He was understanding, in real time, what had just occurred. He had violated the rights of the man who had written the law that governed his own conduct. He had violated the Fourth Amendment on camera, in front of his own supervisor, on the body cam that was supposed to protect him. The live stream was still active.
Rachel Martinez and the other attorneys were still watching. "We have everything," Rachel said through the phone speaker. "Every moment, every word, every violation. We're going to file suit first thing Monday morning. This is ironclad." Over the weekend, Jamal's law firm compiled a comprehensive analysis of what Officer Wellington had done. They reviewed the body cam footage frame by frame. They reviewed the dispatch logs word by word. They reviewed the dash cam footage from Officer Wellington's patrol vehicle. They reviewed the live stream recording. They reviewed everything, multiple times. What they found was a complete, undeniable pattern of constitutional violations, an illegal traffic stop with no probable cause, no reasonable suspicion articulated before the stop, no traffic violation observed before the stop, false statements to dispatch, unlawful detention, attempted unlawful search, assault and battery, racial profiling. Everything was documented. Everything was on multiple videos. Everything was indefensible. A legal expert was retained to provide analysis. The expert was a retired federal judge with 20 years of experience in constitutional law. The expert reviewed the Kingsley v. Harmon decision carefully. The expert reviewed the body cam footage frame by frame. The expert reviewed the dispatch logs. The expert concluded that Officer Wellington had violated the Fourth Amendment, the 14th Amendment, and multiple state laws regarding traffic stops. The expert concluded that every element of an illegal stop was present. By Monday morning, Jamal's firm had drafted a comprehensive civil rights lawsuit. The lawsuit was detailed and specific. They named Officer Marcus Wellington individually. They named the Meadowbrook Police Department. They named the city of Meadowbrook. The lawsuit claimed false arrest and unlawful detention, civil rights violation under 12 U.S.C. Section 1983, violation of Fourth Amendment rights, violation of 14th Amendment, equal protection, assault and battery, abuse of authority, racial discrimination. The amount demanded in damages was $500,000. The firm filed the lawsuit in federal court on Monday, September 11th at 9:17 a.m. The police department received notice by noon. The city's legal team received notice by 1 p.m. Internal Affairs opened an investigation immediately. They did not conduct a leisurely, careful review. They understood the stakes. They conducted an urgent investigation. Officer Wellington was placed on administrative leave. His badge was surrendered. His access to the police station was revoked. His service weapon was secured. The investigation concluded within 1 week. The findings were clear and damning. Illegal stop, no probable cause, no reasonable suspicion, false statements to dispatch, unlawful detention, attempted unlawful search, assault and battery. All violations of constitutional law, all violations of department policy, all violations of basic legal procedure. Officer Wellington was terminated. His badge was revoked permanently. His certification was submitted to the State Police Decertification Board. He was added to the National Decertification Database, a registry that prevents officers who have been fired for misconduct from being hired by any other law enforcement agency. His career in law enforcement was over. At age 37, with 13 years of service, his employment had ended. His future had been irrevocably altered.
You don't live around here. What do you do in this neighborhood?
I just walked out of my house.
Yeah, I doubt that. You don't look like someone who owns property here.
Do you have a warrant or any legal reason to stop me?
I don't need one. Something about you isn't adding up.
You're detaining me on my own property because you decided I don't belong. Big mistake, officer.
For 20 years, Judge Sarah Jenkins had been the woman criminals feared, a federal judge who never bent, never wavered, and never let the guilty walk free. She'd put corrupt cops behind bars, shut down trafficking rings, and built a reputation as one of the most principled figures in the American justice system. But none of that mattered on the peaceful morning her home security camera recorded a patrol officer storming up her driveway, accusing her on her own property of breaking into a nice neighborhood. In front of her 2 children, he demanded she prove she belonged, grabbed her arm, and tried to arrest her without a warrant. What happened next would end his career, ignite a lawsuit, and force the city to pay dearly. How does a defender of justice respond when injustice comes for her? And what will this officer do once he realizes, too late, who she is? Keep watching to see the downfall unfold. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. And if you're new here, hit that like and subscribe button, because accountability only works when it's recorded. Judge Sarah Jenkins was born in 1975 in Chicago, Illinois. Her childhood had been defined by struggle and determination. Her mother, Dorothy Jenkins, had worked as a social worker in the South Side. Her father, Robert Jenkins, had been a high school teacher in a public school system perpetually underfunded and under-resourced. They had raised Sarah and her younger brother in a neighborhood where systemic inequality was not theoretical. It was visible on every block. It was lived every single day. She had watched the systems that were supposed to protect people fail those same people repeatedly. She had watched her mother work with families devastated by domestic violence, poverty, and neglect. She had watched her father teach children whose schools lacked basic resources. She had understood, even as a child, that the law was either a shield or a weapon. It depended on who wielded it. It depended on whether they wielded it fairly. She had decided early that she would become someone who wielded the law as a shield, as a protection, as a defense for people who had no other defense. She had graduated from the University of Illinois in 1997 with honors in criminal justice and political science. She had attended Northwestern Law School on a full scholarship after being accepted to Harvard and Yale as well. She had chosen Northwestern because she wanted to stay in Illinois. She wanted to work in the communities she knew. She had graduated in 2000, ranking in the top 7% of her class. She had chosen federal prosecution deliberately, not corporate law, not tax law, not the lucrative paths that many of her classmates had taken. Federal prosecution, where she could pursue violent criminals, traffickers, and those who exploited the vulnerable. Federal prosecution, where the most serious crimes were prosecuted, where victims could receive justice. For 19 years, she had worked as a federal prosecutor in the U.S. Attorney's Office, Northern District of Illinois. She had prosecuted human trafficking cases with meticulous attention to victim support and trauma-informed prosecution. She had prosecuted gang violence cases, gang-related murders, and organized crime cases. She had built a reputation as someone who was unrelenting in her pursuit of justice, meticulous in her preparation, and absolutely committed to securing convictions against the most dangerous criminals. Her conviction rate was 84% in cases that went to trial. That was exceptional for federal prosecution. In human trafficking cases, where the emotional trauma of victims made testimony difficult, it was revolutionary. She had secured convictions against 47 traffickers, removing them from the streets and preventing them from victimizing additional people. She had worked directly with survivors, counseling them through the trauma of testifying, supporting them emotionally through the legal process, and helping them understand their rights. She had been promoted to senior counsel in the criminal division at age 40. She had supervised other prosecutors. She had trained new attorneys on the specific challenges of trafficking cases. She had written the federal office's trafficking manual, which is now used in offices across the country. She had testified before Congress on the subject of human trafficking and prosecution strategies.
Her name was known in law enforcement circles as someone who got results, someone who protected victims, someone who held predators accountable. When she was nominated to the federal bench at age 46, the nomination had come from President Joe Biden. She had been considered one of the most qualified judicial nominees in recent memory. She had been confirmed by the Senate with overwhelming support. She had taken the oath to uphold the Constitution. She understood that oath to mean that she would protect the vulnerable, that she would hold powerful people accountable, that she would enforce constitutional limits on authority, regardless of who wielded that authority. On the federal bench for 5 years, she had authored 41 published opinions. 19 of those opinions had reversed convictions or sentences on constitutional grounds.
8 had resulted in criminal charges being filed against law enforcement officers for misconduct. Her courtroom was known throughout the federal system as a place where victims were respected and where those who victimized were held accountable. She had sentenced 12 officers to federal prison for civil rights violations. Judge Sarah Jenkins was also a mother. She had 2 children, Marcus, age 9, and Zoe, age 7. She had adopted both children through the foster care system. Marcus had been abandoned at birth in an Illinois hospital. He had spent his first 3 years in temporary care before Judge Jenkins adopted him. Zoe had been removed from a home where she experienced severe neglect and physical abuse. She had been in foster care for 2 years before Judge Jenkins adopted her. Judge Jenkins had given both children stability, structure, love, a safe place to grow. She had taken them to counseling when they needed it. She had made sure they understood that they were wanted, that they were loved, that they belonged in a safe home where they would never be abandoned again. Being a mother and a federal judge was extraordinarily difficult. The hours were long, often 14-hour days. The emotional weight was heavy, making decisions that affected people's lives and freedom. But she had made it work. She had built a life that honored both her commitment to justice and her commitment to her children. She had hired a nanny. She had arranged her schedule to maximize time with Marcus and Zoe. She had made sure that despite her professional demands, her children knew they were her priority. She lived in a suburban neighborhood northwest of Chicago. The homes in the neighborhood were modest to middle class. Her home was a 4-bedroom colonial with blue shutters, a white fence, a driveway, and a small backyard where the children played. She had purchased it 6 years earlier after her judicial appointment. She had paid a mortgage. She had planted a garden. She had created a place where her children could grow up safely, where they would have memories of childhood, where they would feel secure. On the morning of the incident, Judge Jenkins had woken at 6:30 a.m. She had gone through her morning routine with the precision that characterized everything she did. She had prepared breakfast. She had made waffles because Zoe loved waffles, particularly when Judge Jenkins made them from scratch. She had squeezed fresh orange juice. She had made sure Marcus had his lunch packed for school, with the sandwich he preferred and the fruit he would actually eat. She had checked that both children had their backpacks, their homework, their required school documents. She had moved through her morning routine with calm efficiency. Nothing unusual, nothing extraordinary, just a mother preparing to take her children to school before heading to her workplace. This was a routine she had done hundreds of times. The rhythm was familiar. The schedule was tight but manageable. At 7:06 a.m., according to her home security camera, Judge Jenkins had told Marcus and Zoe to get their backpacks and meet her at the car. She needed to drop them at school by 7:45 a.m. The school was 15 minutes away. She needed to be at the courthouse by 8:30 a.m. for her first case. The schedule was tight but manageable. She had done this routine hundreds of times. She had walked them to the driveway. The morning was cool. The sun was just breaking through the clouds. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of quiet that came at that early hour before most people had fully engaged with their days. A quiet that suggested safety, a quiet that felt peaceful. Marcus and Zoe had walked beside her. Marcus was carrying his backpack and his lunchbox. Zoe was carrying her pink backpack. They were talking about their day. Marcus was worried about a math test. Zoe was excited about a school project. They were children living a normal morning with their mother. Judge Jenkins had been locking her front door when she heard the patrol car turn onto her street. The sound was unremarkable. Patrol cars drove down residential streets constantly. She thought nothing of it.
Officer Daniel Kovach was in his mid-30s, muscular, with a reputation in the department for aggressive stops and questionable decision-making. He had been on the force for 12 years. He had conducted approximately 2,000 traffic stops and pedestrian encounters. He had been the subject of 9 internal affairs complaints. All of them had been closed without discipline. The complaints were consistent in their pattern: aggressive approach, rapid escalation, accusations without evidence, racial profiling. But internal affairs had not pursued any of them. The cases had been closed. Officer Kovacs had been cleared. He had continued working. At 7:08 a.m., according to the timestamp on his body cam, Officer Kovacs had received a call from dispatch, a report of a possible breaking and entering in the neighborhood. The caller had stated that they saw a black woman acting suspicious near a house. No one had reported actually seeing a break-in. No alarm had been triggered. The report was vague, based on appearance and perception, not on any actual criminal activity. Officer Kovacs had been instructed to investigate. He had been given an address. He had decided to drive to the neighborhood. He had activated his body cam as a matter of routine. At 7:08 a.m., according to the timestamp on his body cam, Officer Kovacs had turned onto Judge Jenkins Street. He had seen a woman, Judge Sarah Jenkins, standing in her driveway with 2 children. The woman was locking her front door. The children were holding backpacks. Everything about the scene suggested exactly what it was: a mother preparing to take her children to school. But Officer Kovacs had made an instant calculation: a black woman, a nice neighborhood, a house that suggested wealth or at least middle-class stability. The calculation was not based on facts. It was based on assumption. The assumption that a black woman should not own or live in a nice house in a nice neighborhood. Officer Kovacs had slowed his patrol vehicle. He had continued toward the house. He had not approached cautiously. He had approached with purpose, with certainty, with the conviction that he had identified someone who did not belong. He had pulled into the driveway. He exited his vehicle sharply. The body cam activated as he exited. The image showed the driveway from his perspective. The security camera would later show the same scene from a stationary angle. "Excuse me," Officer Kovacs said. His voice was not friendly. It was accusatory. "What are you doing here?" Judge Jenkins turned. Her posture was open. Her hands were visible. She was not defensive. She was simply a woman who had been interrupted while preparing to leave her own home. "I'm taking my children to school," Judge Jenkins said. Her voice was calm, professional, the voice of someone used to speaking in controlled, measured tones. "We live here." "This is your house?" Officer Kovacs asked. The question was phrased to suggest disbelief. The question was designed to communicate that he did not accept her explanation. "Yes," Judge Jenkins said. "This is my home. My children live here. We are preparing to go to school." Officer Kovacs stepped closer. The body cam recorded the invasion of space, the physical pressure being applied through proximity. "I received a report of someone breaking into a nice neighborhood. Someone matching your description was seen acting suspiciously. I was locking my front door. I was not breaking into anything. I was leaving my own home with my children." Officer Kovacs did not lower his voice. He did not step back. He stepped closer. "You're breaking into a nice neighborhood. That doesn't belong here."
The words hung there. The body cam captured them. The security camera captured them. The moment where bias became explicit. The moment where assumption became accusation. The moment where a police officer stated clearly that a black woman should not be in a nice neighborhood. Marcus and Zoe had begun to look nervous. They sensed something wrong. They sensed that their mother was being treated as if she had done something wrong. They sensed threat. "Officer, I live here," Judge Jenkins said. Her voice remained calm, but something had shifted. It had become firmer. It had become the voice of someone who understood the law and understood that what was happening was illegal. "This is my home. I have every right to be here. My children live here. We have every right to be on our own property." "Do you have identification?" Officer Kovacs asked. "Not on me," Judge Jenkins said. I was about to take my children to school. I would not normally carry my identification to walk to my car in my own driveway. Step away from the vehicle, Officer Kovacs said. His hand had moved to his belt. I need to verify your story. My story? Judge Jenkins said. I am standing in my own driveway. This is not a story. This is where I live. Step away from the vehicle, Officer Kovacs repeated. Judge Jenkins did not move. She remained standing where she was. She was not being argumentative. She was simply refusing to comply with an order that had no legal basis. Officer Kovacs moved toward her. His hand went to her arm. He grabbed her wrist, not gently, not with the care that would be shown to someone complying, with force, with the force of someone asserting physical dominance. Marcus and Zoe began to cry. They could see that their mother was being handled roughly. They could see that something was very wrong. "Don't touch me," Judge Jenkins said. Her voice had changed. It was no longer calm. It carried the weight of a person who understood what was happening. "You are violating my Fourth Amendment rights. You are assaulting me in front of my children. This is all being recorded. You need to release me immediately." Officer Kovacs did not release her. He pulled her wrist toward him. He turned her around. He pulled her hand behind her back. "You're under arrest for trespassing," Officer Kovacs said. "I am not trespassing on my own property," Judge Jenkins said. Her voice was still controlled despite the situation. "You have no warrant. You have no probable cause. You are conducting an unlawful arrest." Officer Kovacs applied handcuffs. The metal closed around her wrists with two distinct clicks. The body cam recorded the moment. The security camera recorded the moment. Marcus and Zoe were crying now. They were calling out to their mother. They were asking what was happening. They were confused and afraid. "Mommy!" Zoe cried out. She was 7 years old. She did not understand what was happening. She only understood that her mother was being taken away. "It's okay, baby," Judge Jenkins said. She was still calm. She was still trying to protect her children, even as she was being arrested. "It's okay. This is a mistake. Stay with your nanny. I will explain everything." The nanny, who had been inside the house preparing to leave with the children, had come to the door. Her name was Patricia. She had worked for Judge Jenkins for 3 years. She understood immediately that something terrible was happening. Officer Kovacs was walking Judge Jenkins toward his patrol car. She was in handcuffs. She was being treated as a criminal. She was being arrested on her own property, in front of her children, without a warrant, without probable cause. Marcus and Zoe were running after their mother. Patricia was trying to hold them back. They were screaming. A neighbor, Margaret Chen, had come out of her house. She had heard the commotion. She had seen Judge Jenkins being handcuffed. She had seen the children crying. She immediately recognized what was happening. "That's Judge Jenkins," Margaret Chen said. Her voice was loud enough for others to hear. "That's our judge. Stop! You're making a mistake."
Officer Kovacs did not stop. He continued walking Judge Jenkins toward his patrol car. He was not listening. He was not caring about the reality of the situation. He was executing what he had decided to do. Other neighbors were emerging from their homes. They were seeing the spectacle. They were confused. They were alarmed. Several of them recognized Judge Jenkins. Several of them had seen her on local news. Several of them knew that she was a federal judge. Officer Kovacs opened the rear door of his patrol car. He placed his hand on Judge Jenkins' head, a gesture typically used with suspects, not with law-abiding citizens. He guided her into the back seat. The body cam captured every moment. Judge Jenkins was placed in the back of a police car at 17:19 a.m., according to the body cam timestamp. She had been arrested at 7:12 a.m. The arrest had taken 7 minutes. 7 minutes from her locking her front door to being placed in the back of a patrol vehicle. Officer Kovacs was driving when his radio crackled.
Dispatch was providing him updated information, information that changed everything. The dispatch voice was tight. Unit 12, be advised, your detainee is identified as Federal Judge Sarah Jenkins, Northern District. Verify immediately. Officer Kovac's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The body cam captured his face in the rearview mirror. The moment of realization, the moment where he understood what he had done. He did not immediately release her. He continued driving. He was calculating. He was understanding in real time that he had made a catastrophic error, an irreversible error, an error that was being recorded. At 7:34 a.m., according to the body cam timestamp, a black SUV with federal agents pulled alongside Officer Kovac's vehicle on the highway. 2 agents exited. They moved to the patrol car with authority. One agent opened the rear door where Judge Jenkins was seated, still in handcuffs. "Uncuff her," the agent said. His voice was calm but carried absolute authority. "Immediately." Officer Kovac hesitated. "Now," the agent repeated. Officer Kovac exited his vehicle. He walked to the back. He removed the handcuffs. Judge Jenkins' wrists were examined immediately. There were marks, red marks where the metal had pressed into her skin, bruises forming where the cuffs had been applied with force. "Your Honor," the agent said, his voice changing to deep respect, "I sincerely apologize for this situation." Judge Jenkins did not speak for a moment. She was gathering herself. She was breathing deeply. She was understanding what had just occurred. She had been arrested without probable cause. She had been arrested on her own property. She had been arrested in front of her children, and it had all been recorded. "I want his badge number," Judge Jenkins said. "I want his name. I want everything documented, and I will be filing a federal civil rights complaint."
By the time Judge Jenkins had returned home to her children, the story was already beginning to spread. Patricia had called her attorney. Margaret Chen had called a news station. The security camera footage was already being copied and shared. By noon, the body cam footage had leaked to local news. By 2 p.m., it had been shared on social media. By 4 p.m., millions of people had seen a federal judge being arrested on her own property without a warrant. The reaction was immediate and intense. The police department's phone lines were flooded with calls. The mayor's office was receiving messages. The city council was being contacted. National news outlets were picking up the story. Internal Affairs opened an investigation immediately. They did not conduct a leisurely, careful review. They conducted an urgent investigation. They knew the optics were catastrophic. They knew the legal exposure was enormous. Officer Kovac was placed on administrative leave, not suspension with pay, administrative leave pending investigation. His badge was surrendered. His access to the police station was revoked. The investigation concluded within 72 hours. The findings were clear and damning. Unlawful stop, unlawful detention, unlawful arrest, no probable cause, no reasonable suspicion, racial profiling, assault, all violations of constitutional law, all violations of department policy. An legal expert appeared on television to break down what had occurred. She explained the Fourth Amendment requirement for probable cause. She explained that an officer cannot arrest someone simply because they believe the person looks suspicious. She explained that Officer Kovac had violated the most fundamental protections of the Constitution. Judge Jenkins filed a federal civil rights lawsuit. She named Officer Kovac individually. She named the police department. She named the municipality. She named the city. The lawsuit claimed false arrest, civil rights violation under 42 U.S.C. Section 1983, violation of Fourth Amendment rights, violation of 14th Amendment rights, emotional distress to minors, assault, battery, abuse of authority,
racial discrimination. The amount demanded in damages was substantial, but more than monetary compensation, Judge Jenkins was demanding accountability. She was demanding that the system acknowledge what had happened and ensure it would not happen again. Officer Kovach's defense was weak. He claimed he had received a report of suspicious activity, but the report had not matched Judge Jenkins at all. The report had been vague. The report had been based entirely on appearance. The body cam footage showed clearly that Judge Jenkins had done nothing suspicious. She had been locking her door and preparing to leave her home with her children. Witnesses testified. The nanny testified about the children's trauma. Neighbors testified about what they had witnessed. A law enforcement expert testified about racial profiling patterns in police stops. A constitutional law professor testified about Fourth Amendment violations. The jury watched the body cam footage repeatedly. They saw Officer Kovach approach with hostility. They saw him refuse to accept simple explanations. They saw him escalate without cause. They saw him grab Judge Jenkins and place her in handcuffs. They saw him refuse to stop even when the truth became apparent. Several jury members were visibly shaken by what they saw. Officer Kovach testified. He claimed he had been responding to a report. He claimed he had had reasonable suspicion. He claimed that Judge Jenkins had been evasive and non-compliant. But the body cam footage contradicted every statement he made. The footage showed him escalating without cause. The footage showed Judge Jenkins remaining calm despite his hostility. The jury deliberated for 9 hours. They reviewed the footage multiple times. They reviewed the law. They asked questions of the judge about the standard for reasonable suspicion. They asked questions about the standard for probable cause. They were taking their responsibility seriously. On day 2 of deliberation, they returned with a unanimous verdict. Officer Daniel Kovach had violated Judge Sarah Jenkins' constitutional rights. He was liable for civil rights violations. He was liable for false arrest. He was liable for assault.
Officer, what exactly am I being confronted for?
Step back from the car. We got a call about you.
A call for what? I'm putting groceries in my trunk.
You fit the description. That's all you need to know.
The seat's right here. You haven't asked to see it.
Turn around. Hands behind your back.
You're detaining me without probable cause. My name is Byron Ashford. I'm sure you recognize the name.
The Westfield Shopping Center parking lot sat half full on a Saturday afternoon. Families loaded groceries into minivans. A child rode in a shopping cart while his mother pushed. An elderly couple walked arm in arm toward the entrance. Somewhere near the pharmacy, a car alarm chirped once and fell silent. The timestamp on the body cam footage would later read 14:23:17. Byron Ashford stood at the open trunk of his silver sedan, placing grocery bags into the cargo space with methodical care. 2 large brown paper bags, heavy with produce and staples. A smaller plastic bag with eggs positioned carefully so nothing would shift during the drive home. His receipt was folded in his left hand, a habit from years of expense tracking, of documenting everything. He wore a charcoal suit, tailored precisely, with a light blue dress shirt open at the collar. He had come from the office, stopping for groceries on his way home. His briefcase sat in the back seat. His bar identification was in his wallet. His business cards were in a leather case in his jacket pocket. 23 years in law, 8 as a city prosecutor building cases against financial criminals and corrupt officials. His conviction rate in that office had become a benchmark. 15 years since as senior associate at Ashford and Sterling LLP, the firm his father had founded 4 decades earlier. Corporate litigation now, but the prosecutor's instincts remained. The attention to evidence, the awareness of procedure, the understanding that documentation was everything. Every other Saturday, he volunteered at a community center on the city's east side, teaching teenagers their constitutional rights during police encounters. He walked them through detention procedures, search limitations, the difference between a request and a lawful order. He taught them to stay calm, to keep their hands visible, to ask clarifying questions without escalating.
He taught them everything he knew. The patrol car entered from the south entrance, moving faster than the posted limit. It cut across 2 lanes of traffic, drawing a honk from a minivan that had to brake suddenly. The driver's door opened before the vehicle had fully stopped. Officer Kevin Driscoll stepped out, 29 years old, 3 years on the force, 1 prior complaint in his personnel file, dismissed after a brief internal review. His hand moved immediately to his holstered taser. His tactical flashlight swung into frame, activated despite the bright afternoon sunlight. His breathing was already elevated, audible on the bodycam's microphone before he had taken 3 steps. He crossed the lot in aggressive strides, closing distance with the urgency of someone responding to an active threat. There was no active threat. There was a man loading groceries. "Step away from the vehicle. Hands behind your head. We got a report of a guy matching your description shoplifting high-end electronics." Byron turned, a grocery bag still in his hands. Confusion crossed his face, followed by the careful assessment of a man who had spent decades reading hostile witnesses. He set the bag down slowly, keeping his movements deliberate and visible. "Officer, these are groceries." He raised his left hand, receipt visible between his fingers. "My receipt is right here. You're welcome to—" The officer lunged forward. The frame jolted violently. Officer Driscoll's hand closed around Byron's wrist before he could finish his sentence. In one motion, he spun the attorney around and slammed him against the open trunk of the sedan. Metal thudded against metal. The grocery bags shifted. Inside one of them, the sharp crack of eggs breaking was audible on the bodycam's microphone. Byron's cheek pressed against the cold metal of the trunk lid. His suit jacket bunched awkwardly around his shoulders. The receipt fluttered from his fingers, drifting to the pavement beside a wheel well. "I said, hands behind your head." "Officer, that's completely unnecessary." His voice remained controlled, the same measured tone he used when cross-examining hostile witnesses. "My hands were visible. I was cooperating." Yeah, everyone's innocent." The officer's voice carried mockery the bodycam recorded with perfect clarity. "Funny suit, though. You played dress-up for work?" The handcuffs appeared. Metal glinted in the afternoon sunlight. The ratcheting sound cut through the ambient noise of the parking lot. The cuffs clicked tight, too tight. The edges bit into Byron's wrists. "I'm detaining you for investigation. You fit the description of a suspect in a theft." "What description?" "Black male, medium build." "What was the suspect wearing? What was he allegedly stealing? What store reported the theft?" No answer. The officer's hand pressed against Byron's back, keeping him pinned to the trunk. The bodycam captured the angle, looking down at a man in a tailored suit, face pressed against his own car, grocery bags visible in the cargo space behind him. "Officer, my receipt is on the ground. It shows I purchased groceries from the market 20 minutes ago. It will verify everything I've told you." The receipt lay 6 inches from the officer's boot, white paper against gray asphalt, time-stamped, itemized. Officer Driscoll didn't look down. "Let's see what you're hiding." Without consent, without legal basis, Officer Driscoll began searching Byron's pockets. His gloved hands patted down the suit jacket, reaching into the interior pocket, extracting items one by one. A leather wallet, well-worn, containing credit cards, a driver's license, and cash the officer counted aloud. A smartphone, screen locked, notifications visible, calendar reminders for Monday meetings, a text from his wife asking about dinner, and a business card case, black leather, embossed with subtle gold lettering. The officer flipped it open. Byron Ashford, Senior Associate, Ashford and Sterling LLP. And beneath it, in a separate slot, a laminated card with a photograph and an official seal. State Bar Identification, member in good standing. The officer's hands stopped moving. The bodycam recorded the shift in his breathing, sudden shallowness, a pause that lasted 3 seconds too long. His gloves trembled slightly at the edges of the frame. "You're a lawyer?"
I've been trying to tell you that. I'm also a former city prosecutor, 8 years in this county's criminal courts. I know half the judges personally. A voice called out from somewhere behind them. The body cam's audio picked it up clearly. Hey, he wasn't doing anything. Another voice, female, closer. I literally had groceries. I saw him buy them. The parking lot that had seemed empty now contained a growing audience. A woman with a shopping cart had stopped 10 feet away, phone raised and recording. A man in a delivery uniform stood near a white van, also filming. A mother had pulled her children close, watching with an expression of someone who understood exactly what they were witnessing. The officer's head turned slightly, acknowledging the witnesses for the first time. Quit moving, I'm conducting an investigation. I haven't moved since you put me in handcuffs. His composure remained absolute. You've ignored the receipt, you've ignored my explanation, you've ignored the witnesses. That camera on your chest is recording every misstep.
Byron turned his head slowly until he was looking directly into the body cam lens. The afternoon light illuminated his face. Calm, focused, controlled. He took a breath, and when he spoke, his voice carried the cadence of a courtroom. Officer, let me explain what you've done today. The officer's hand remained on Byron's back, but the pressure had eased. The confidence that had driven him across the parking lot was draining away. You've detained me without probable cause. Black male, medium build, matches approximately 20% of the adult male population in this city. You've dismissed exculpatory evidence. My receipt was in my hand, and I offered to show it to you before you touched me. You've used excessive force on a cooperative citizen who never resisted. You've conducted a search without consent. He paused, letting silence emphasize what came next. And you've done all of this while wearing a camera that recorded everything, every word, every action. Officer Driscoll's gloves slipped slightly against the trunk. His breathing had become shallow. My name is Byron Ashford. I'm a senior associate at Ashford and Sterling, LLP. I'm a former city prosecutor who spent 8 years in this county's criminal courts. And what you've done today is hand me the keys to the city treasury. Look, I just need to verify. You chose not to verify anything. You had every opportunity to investigate before you detained me. You chose force instead. All right, let's just... The officer's voice had become small. Let's just sort this out. We will, in civil court, in disciplinary hearings, and in the press when that footage is released. The body cam trembled, visible motion at the edges of the frame. The second patrol car arrived without sirens, pulling into a space 30 feet away. Sergeant Maria Vasquez stepped out. 16 years on the force, a reputation for thorough, by-the-book supervision. She assessed the scene as she approached. Man in a suit, handcuffed against the trunk of a silver sedan, grocery bags in the cargo space, receipt on the ground, multiple civilians with phones raised. Officer Driscoll, what's going on here? He, fit the description of a suspect in a theft. A theft of what? Electronics, high-end electronics from one of the stores. Which store? Silence. Did you verify the call with dispatch? Longer silence. Byron spoke without turning round. There was no call verified. There was no specific description, no probable cause, and the receipt that would have exonerated me immediately has been lying on the ground for the past 10 minutes. Sergeant Vasquez looked at the ground. She looked at the receipt. She bent down and picked it up, examining the timestamp, the itemized list of groceries, the total. He had this when you arrived? In his hand, I confirmed. I offered to show it. He slammed me against the car instead. She looked at Sergeant Driscoll with an expression that needed no interpretation. What else did you find during your search?
He held up the business card case with trembling fingers. Sergeant Vasquez took it, opened it, saw the name, the firm, the bar identification with its official seal. You detained a senior associate, a former city prosecutor. I didn't know. You didn't ask. She turned to Byron. Take the cuffs off, now. Officer Driscoll fumbled with his keys. The handcuffs clicked open, falling away from wrists that already bore red marks. Byron turned slowly, rubbing his wrists with deliberate care, cataloging injuries for future documentation. He adjusted his suit jacket, smoothed his collar, retrieved his wallet, his phone, and his business card case from the trunk where the officer had placed them. I'll need your badge number, your full name, your supervisor's name, the incident number, and the catalog for whatever call supposedly prompted this encounter. Of course, sir, Sergeant Vasquez said. I'll provide everything myself. Byron picked up his grocery bags, including the one with the cracked eggs, yolks already seeping through the paper. He placed them in his trunk with methodical care. I'll also need a copy of the body cam footage, all of it, starting from the moment he entered the parking lot. That will need to go through official channels. It will go through whatever channels I choose to pursue, and I choose to pursue them all.
Internal Affairs opened within 48 hours. The footage left no room for interpretation. Officer Driscoll had responded to a call that was never verified with dispatch. No record existed. He had detained a citizen based on a description so vague it was functionally meaningless. He had ignored exculpatory evidence offered before any force was used. He had conducted a search without consent. He had applied excessive force to a cooperative citizen. His incident report, filed 3 hours after the encounter, bore no resemblance to reality. It described a suspicious individual who had refused to comply with lawful orders and had made furtive movements toward his pockets. It claimed the receipt had never been visible, that the identification had only been discovered after the detention was complete, that the force used was reasonable under the circumstances. The body cam showed Byron lifting his receipt before he was touched, showed him explaining, showed the officer lunging before those words were finished, showed the slam, the cuffs, the search conducted without a single question asked. The Department of Justice opened a federal civil rights investigation within the week. The district attorney's office faced an unusual situation. Byron had worked there for 8 years. He had trained some of the current prosecutors. The office recused those who had worked with him directly, but the case proceeded with the rigor the evidence demanded. Officer Kevin Driscoll was charged with official misconduct, battery, civil rights violations, and filing a false police report. The trial lasted 4 days. The body cam footage was played for the jury 3 times. Byron testified for 2 hours, walking through each moment of the encounter with precision. The jury deliberated less than 5 hours. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing took place 6 weeks later. You had a badge, the judge said. You had training. You had a camera recording every action you took, and you still chose to violate a citizen's constitutional rights based on nothing more than the color of his skin and the neighborhood where he was shopping. Officer Driscoll stood with his head bowed. 5 years in state prison, 3 years probation upon release, permanent revocation of your law enforcement certification. The gavel fell. The civil case proceeded on a parallel track. Byron's firm did not represent him directly, a conflict of interest, but the attorneys they recommended were among the best civil rights litigators in the state. The city's legal team watched the body cam footage in a conference room on the 12th floor of the municipal building. They watched it 4 times. They consulted with their insurance carrier. They calculated the cost of a jury trial, not just the financial exposure, but the reputational damage, the political fallout, the image of a senior associate with a flawless record being slammed against his own car while holding a receipt for groceries. They settled for $7 million. The announcement came 5 months after the incident. Byron stood at a podium in front of the county courthouse, flanked by his attorneys. "This settlement is not about money," he said. "I've spent my career believing in the law. I've prosecuted criminals. I've defended corporations. I've argued before judges and juries." He paused. What happened in that parking lot had nothing to do with evidence. An officer saw a black man in a nice suit loading groceries into a nice car, and he decided that didn't make sense. He decided I didn't belong. He was so certain of that assumption that he ignored the receipt in my hand, the explanation I was giving, and every principle of law enforcement he had sworn to uphold. The settlement funds were allocated according to a plan Byron had developed in the weeks following the incident, a portion to criminal justice reform organizations, a portion to his community legal education program, expanding it to serve more teenagers, a portion to establish scholarships for law students from underrepresented communities. The city council, under pressure from footage that had circulated nationally, passed new legislation within 3 months. The Ashford mandate required immediate release of any body cam footage involving claims of racial profiling. No more delays, no more technical difficulties, no more convenient failures. "No more lost tapes," Byron said at the signing ceremony. "When an officer acts, the public has a right to see it."
Officer Kevin Driscoll served his sentence at a state correctional facility 200 miles from the city where he had once worn a badge. His law enforcement certification was permanently revoked. His name was entered into the Brady-Giglio database, ensuring that any future employer in any jurisdiction would know. He was unemployable in law enforcement. He would remain so for life. The department that had employed him underwent mandatory retraining. Every officer completed a 40-hour course on constitutional rights, racial bias, and proper detention procedures. The training materials included footage from the Ashford incident, with legal experts explaining exactly what went wrong at each stage. Sergeant Maria Vasquez was promoted to lieutenant, recognized for her handling of a situation that could have escalated further. She spoke at community forums, acknowledging the department's failures and outlining changes. Byron returned to his practice, continued his work in corporate litigation, his reputation enhanced rather than diminished. Clients who had heard about the incident sought him out specifically, trusting a man who had demonstrated composure under impossible circumstances. He continued his Saturday volunteer sessions at the community center. His lessons now included a first-hand account of what could happen even when you did everything right. "I kept my hands visible," he told the teenagers. "I spoke calmly. I offered evidence. I didn't resist, didn't argue, didn't escalate. And I was still slammed against my car and handcuffed while people watched." They listened with an attention that had intensified since the footage went viral. So why do we still teach these techniques? Because they matter. Not because they guarantee safety, nothing guarantees that, but because they create a record. They establish what you did and what was done to you. They give you evidence when it's time to demand accountability. He paused. The camera on that officer's chest recorded everything. His violations, my composure, the truth. And when it was over, the truth was what mattered. The footage remains archived in federal databases, in news archives, in training materials used by police departments across the country. It shows a parking lot on a Saturday afternoon, a man loading groceries into his car, an officer who saw something that wasn't there and acted on assumptions that destroyed his career. And it shows a receipt lying on the asphalt, ignored until it was too late. Byron still shops at the same grocery store, still loads purchases into the same silver sedan, still wears tailored suits on weekdays and comfortable clothes on weekends, still believes in the law, not because it protected him in that parking lot, but because it held accountable the man who violated it. His wife asked him once if he ever thought about shopping somewhere else, somewhere without the memory. He considered the question for a long moment before answering. That parking lot is just a parking lot. What happened there doesn't define the place, it defines the officer who made those choices, and he's paying for them now. The community center where he volunteers expanded its program after the settlement funds arrived. More teenagers, more neighborhoods, more Saturday sessions where young people learned what Byron had spent his career teaching, that the law exists to protect everyone, that rights are not granted but inherent, and that documentation is the difference between a story and evidence. One of the teenagers asked him, months after the incident, whether he had been afraid. Not afraid, angry, but anger doesn't help in those moments. What helps is knowing exactly what's happening and exactly what it means. The officer thought he had power because he had a badge and a gun, but I had something he didn't have. What? I had the truth, and I had a camera recording it. The story ended without celebration. No speeches of triumph, no moment where the officer admitted he was wrong or understood what he had done. It ended with a man who kept his composure when composure was all he had, who documented everything, who waited for the system to work and then made it work when it failed him. The body cam recorded the truth, and the truth, eventually, was enough.